if you get too, uppity about your shit and you don't feel
Yeah.
like you can take that criticism, then ultimately you're just kind of hindering your own process and you're hindering your own growth.
Nate, first off, like big thank you to you for just giving me your time, being
Yeah,
interested to
no
jump
problem,
on.
dude.
Yeah.
100%. I feel like these creatives, like we have to like kind of stick together. I think that was like one of the big reasons why I jumped on it.
What are some things about your early years that I need to know to understand where you are today?
So I started in like the kind of skateboarding world. Like I was introduced to skateboarding at a very young age. Skateboarding kept me intrigued with like illustrating, and then it kind of like segued into like graffiti, and then seeing street art and seeing these murals on the walls, all that crazy stuff as a kid. It's definitely something that you can appreciate and look up to. And then I mean after that it was kind of just figuring out like how I'm going to channel that creative energy into that field. And I started, painting, and I started drawing, and then, it wasn't until later in life to where I was like, oh, okay, how can I, make this into a career? But like
Yeah.
in the younger years, like I was just a kid that, liked to skate, loved to spray paint, and I loved to draw. And like that's kind of all it was.
Once you started pursuing this as a career and looking for jobs, what were some of the earliest gigs and opportunities that opened up for you?
Honestly, I mean, just like homies, like just knowing people that knew people, $25 logos, that like a homegirl of mine like knew how to, was a dog trainer and they needed something real quick. It was just really just word to mouth, like small little homies that were trying small little businesses.
What's the story with Ethika? One of the things that you do is to say you're an apparel designer at Ethika. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those things. I was just graduating. And I don't know. I've always just wanted to be in the skateboarding industry, and that was kind of when I saw that they were like hiring. That was like in my head, like a light bulb switch, and I was like, oh, they're in that industry. Now, Ethika is not necessarily only in skateboarding or anything like that. It's like it goes from action sports to hip hop, streetwear, street culture. Like we have MLB. Yeah, it's like all walks of life. But I know it was really kind of stapled with Ryan Sheckler, who is a pro
Mm.
skater that I really looked up to. And I mean, I still look up to him. He's became dad. I'm sure he's going to be a great father, but he was a gnarly skater that was similar age as me. So it's like, oh, this is the way in to like where I can stay in the industry, that I grew up loving. And that was kind of the biggest thing. And so I shot my shot, and I mean, it was a tedious process. There were multiple interviews, and mind you, at the time that I didn't have any professional experience. I was just out of college. And so there's many interviews, there's design challenges to see, the art style and see if it was something that we can produce for the company.
Mm.
Relatively easy to see if we mesh. But I think ultimately it was, the personality that really kind of got me in there. Like my art director, his name's Kyle. He handpicked our team, and it was really just this. I think the reason why I got picked up, and I think the reason why half the designers got picked up was, I mean, it goes back to relationships. And it was curated by Kyle and my art director Vic, and it was just curated in a sense to where we all got along together and we were going to be the best possible team, and not necessarily the art style. And I think with that, because it was a tedious process, it did take long. But I think because of that, it's just kismet. Like our team is super solid. We all have each other's backs. We joke, but we can get serious. So this curated team's like really, really on point. But yeah, that was kind of like the biggest reason why I think I made it in.
And how long have you been with Ethika as an apparel designer now?
Going on 2 years. So I'm still like kind of, on the newer end of things. I'm not like this well established designer that has like multiple years under my belt. But I know when I hopped in, it was definitely one of those things where it's just like dive all in, and you learn so much just
Oh,
within a small amount of time. Like I learned so much from my team. and new styles, new techniques, and it really kind of, I think, as a team, we bring the best artists out of each other. We're not afraid to critique each other or anything like that. So I think, given the small amount of time that I've been there, but the relationships that culminated in how close we all got together, definitely sparked like a lot more. What's the word I'm looking for? Knowledge. It gave me a lot of knowledge, like within a short period of time.
Quick sidetrack, since you're just talking on this subject of growth. What are your thoughts on specializing in one thing, maybe one media, and
Hmm.
really honing on that, versus diversity in media? What's your thoughts on that?
Dude, that's actually really hard. That's a good question because like I'm kind of doing the same thing right now between like certain mediums of design, and especially because like I grew up doing like drawing, painting, graffiti. Like there's just so many different outlets that like I was being creative. I feel like a part of me wants to say it's best to just really like dive in, right, on one thing. But then the other part of me is like it's hard as a creative to do so, and not express yourself in other ways. I feel like I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to like experiment with like other mediums and other like creative outlets. If you want to hone in on focus on one, then like I
Mm.
think that's a great opportunity to become, a master of one skill. But then you have to look at the opposition of like, would you rather be a Swiss Army knife? Would you rather have, a bunch of skill sets rather than just the one, even though you can excel a lot further into one? So I honestly I'm torn. I can't
Hmm.
say necessarily one or the other because I'm kind of in that same boat where it's like, ooh, do I
Hmm.
focus all my efforts on here or all my efforts over here? I have a focus, but don't let that close your mind out to other things. I think that would be the best advice I can give is like, yeah, try to master one and throughout that journey and throughout that travel, you never know what doors are going to open up. And you
Mm.
just, if those doors open up, don't be afraid to step in them because some people like get stuck in their lane and they stay in that lane.
I think that's a really good point. That makes me, listening to that makes me think, maybe it doesn't have to be one or the other. And it's not a black and white, right and wrong. I guess
Hmm.
for some for some people it makes sense. Maybe depends on their goals. Maybe
Yeah.
the position they're trying to get into. That's what the hiring managers are looking for. At the same time, listening to you makes me think, I'm as an artist, you would never outgrow your medium. And I hear lots of people say there's no finish line. There's kind of the beauty in the process, and you can
Oh,
spend your whole life for
100%.
that. Yeah.
100%. I
So.
mean, I can agree with that wholeheartedly in the sense of, I mean, you really kind of have to take a step back and enjoy the process rather than, just chase after the goal because I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing when you learn to grow and then you take pride in, new things. It might not be the best work, but you can always take pride in something as long as you're, pushing towards something bigger, like
Yeah.
I think that's a big problem too, is people get discouraged because there's a lot, it's not a black and white and it is a gray area. And I think that kind of withholds people from, pushing the envelope a little bit more and getting
Mm.
into something that I guess it would be niche in the sense or something that they wouldn't normally do because it's,
Mm.
not the status quo at the time. Like people are hiring in this section or people are hiring in that section. But I mean, at the end of all that, if I wasn't like personally for me, if I wasn't tapping into, jumping into different uh mediums and stuff, like I would probably be drawing and that's it. I
Mm.
wouldn't be in design. I wouldn't be into painting. I wouldn't have all these other opportunities out there because I just focused in on one.
I know you're a tattoo artist as well, right?
I wouldn't call myself a tattoo artist. I think right now I'm just like experimenting in the medium,
That's cool.
So I'm just like kind of jumping in and say, I mean, it's pretty much exactly what we're talking about. It's just, I love tattoos. I mean, I have a sleeve and a couple more on the side. I plan on like getting completely covered, but because it piqued my interest, I'm like, oh, okay, like that's something I could possibly do. So I've been just like dabbling in it and like kind of learning the history behind it. And I just think people need to stop taking themselves so seriously. I think that's one of the bigger reasons why I got into tattooing was just because I think, people just need to, get off their high horse a little
Yeah.
bit, humble themselves. We're all
Yeah.
humans at the end of the day. And if it's a way to express yourself, like, put your nose down. You don't need your nose up all the time.
You said something really interesting when talking about Ethika and joining a team with your creative director, and how
Hmm.
being in the team has almost jump started your skill set. Can you walk me through some of the biggest way that joining a team has improved your designs?
Yeah, no, and I know this 100%. This one's like back of my hand because I try to be appreciative about this as much as I can. But I mean, first and foremost, like I'd never used Photoshop prior to jumping on a team. I've seen their artwork and like how they would, create crazy imagery that looks so realistic that my brain couldn't, fathom it. Like I was just like, how did you do that? And then I just kind of from there just like took inspo off what they would do, and I just kind of taught myself Photoshop like
You
uh
know,
as I was hopping in.
the word I'm thinking of for that is just effectiveness. I mean, they mentioned a lot there, but having a team where you as the individual, you don't necessarily have to know, you don't have to be the master of Photoshop. Like if somebody
Hmm.
on the team kind of is, everybody brings something to the table and you can kind of learn from
Yeah,
each other
yeah.
and kind of cover each other's blind spot, for the lack of a better term. That's kind of cool. How many people are in your team and what are all the rules?
I want to say I think there's like 12 last time. I might be forgetting people.
Okay.
But like I'm pretty sure there's 12 people on our creative team.
Yeah.
And like our roles, I mean, we're all flexible. So I mean, we have anywhere from licensing, e-com, collaborative projects. We have marketing stuff, we have apparel design stuff like that. And I mean, we all kind of wear the hats. I think it kind of goes back to like watching each other's backs. So if our licensing, team needs help because we have like NBA finals coming up and we have X amount of designs that need to get done.
Mm,
I don't necessarily do licensing. I've done a couple pairs of licensing, but
yeah.
that's but we're all more than welcome to help. And so I think
Mm.
that's like kind of where we thrive as a team. But so that's kind of like we all wear the same hat, but we have proficiencies in certain of those groupings.
Let's say a young designer wants to join your team. What are some of the key skills that they must have? And what are some of the ones that they think they may have to have, but are actually not necessary?
I mean, I'm going to be blatantly honest here. I don't necessarily think you need to be able to draw or paint or anything like that to be a designer. I think
Mm,
there's a lot of us out there that don't necessarily illustrate or anything like that. It's nice to have, especially when you're creating your own assets and you're creating your own designs and stuff like that. It's nice to throw a little
yeah.
personal touch into, but I don't think it's a necessity. But trailing onto that, what I think is a necessity is communication for sure. Best projects I've done were
Mm.
because the communication was just so open. It is hard in a corporate sense because you have to like carry yourself a certain way and you have to be, a certain type of person. And you kind of have to make sure you don't get taken advantage of, in full honesty. You also, I think you need that open communication to where it's not so corporate and you guys can laugh about certain things and you're not scared to say what you need to say. Like, I mean, I've had a couple projects where they wanted a certain thing and I'm just like, no, sorry, dude, it's going to look ugly. And because we had that line of open communication, it was a lot quicker
Mm,
to come to a agreement, to come to an answer and a solution to that problem because we had that streamlined open communication. When you're
yeah.
working with corporate, sometimes I feel like people get nervous and people think, you can't say certain things, and which is somewhat true given like the corporate climate and stuff. But at the end of the day, you can't be scared to voice your opinion. If you know it's going to be bad, let them know it's going to be bad. If they disagree with you, I mean, still cash the check, make it bad, but
Hmm.
that's for them to decide. I think that's the biggest thing that most designers seem to know. It's just having that open communication.
What it sounds like is if a young designer wanted to join the team, what's really important is like the ability to work with teams, like just for them to get along with the team members is
Yeah,
probably just really important, more so than like being a master at Photoshop.
yeah,
Is there is there
100%.
is there anything else that's super important?
Yeah, humble yourself. Don't be a dick. I
Mm,
mean, honestly, like, just don't act like your shit don't stink. Like, we all get critiqued. We all, are going through the process. And so, like, again, some of us have stronger skill sets than other, and we
mm,
all have a lot to learn, and we can learn from one another. And I feel like if you get too, uppity about your shit and you don't feel
yeah.
like you can take that criticism, then ultimately you're just kind of hindering your own process and you're hindering your own growth, because that's, again, biggest part of being in a team. For me, the best part about it is the fact that I developed a lot of new skills, and that was because I humbled myself. It's like, I didn't know how to do that, so
Yeah.
I had my homie teach me. And then once I learned, fucking Pandora's box open, all the floodgates open. Like, my style completely revolutionized into
Mm,
something that is like, if I were to show you some of my stuff that I did like a year and a half ago, I guarantee you
yeah.
wouldn't be able to recognize it.
That must be really gratifying if you can look at a design from a year and a half ago and see the improvement.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, it's bittersweet because I think prior to this job, I was similar to and I was in the lane of what I'm saying not to do, right? Like, I acted like my shit didn't stink. Like, I knew I was decent at what I did. Like, I had a couple successful like logos, a couple successful t-shirts designs and stuff like that. And so like I did have like kind of that like, oh, my shit don't stink, and it worked to a degree because you need that confidence to sell yourself, right? You need that confidence to sell your product, your designs. But at the same time, once you pass the threshold where you close yourself off to like the rest of society and not accept some of this criticisms, and not open your eyes to like, or open your mind to like other styles and how other people will do it, that's when you really start hindering yourself. And luckily,
Mm,
I was picked up before that happened, because
mm,
I feel like if you stay in a set way and you kind of act in a set way, nobody's even
yeah,
going to want to work with you. So
yeah.
you're hindering yourself right there.
You sound like you're pretty aware of your strengths as a designer. What are some of the strengths that you've uncovered about yourself, and what are some of the areas that you're working on that are maybe blind spots to
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah. So I mean, one of the biggest things that I think that I've brought to the table, at least in Ethika, is more or less imagination.
Mm,
Like starting from like illustrating to painting. Like, I used to draw all these outlandish characters. And actually, one of my main inspirations, you should look this guy up. His name's Greg Mike, and he creates these characters out of other characters, or he'll like, it's insane. You have to see it to understand it, but he'll mesh all these things together, and that really kind of like opened my eyes, that mentality and that imagination.
mm,
And I think also, like I was saying with color palettes, I feel like I have a strong sense of color awareness, and that's just because I grew up painting, graffiti, everything in between. I just always love color, just and seeing how it works together. And I never necessarily studied it super like closely, but even in school, like, I would put some studying into color theory and color palettes and stuff like that to see what bounces off each other. Like, that
yeah.
is probably one of my favorite skill sets I have, because you just
Mm,
all it takes is a tweak of color, and it can change everything. It can change the mood, the feeling, the cohesiveness. Like, it it changes everything. So I definitely pride myself on like the knowledge of color. But other than skill sets I'm bad at, like I said earlier, patterns
Mm.
are ass. I don't know how people do patterns, and it's a very unappreciated skill. Like I think it's a very underrated skill. I think it's so much harder than what people think that it is. Like I get like there's simple patterns out there, but even the simplest of patterns, like you have to know how everything works and fits together to where it will become repeatable and where you can make it into, something larger rather than just like drawing a picture. I think yeah, patterns definitely one of the hardest things in my opinion.
Patterns. I've never.
You don't think
Okay.
about it.
Yeah.
You don't think about it, but like even if you look at like history of like camouflage is a good way to describe pattern because if you look at like a history of camouflage, like they had to use it in certain areas, so it had to have a certain color palette, and then on top of that, it had to have certain spacings in between certain other colors to blend in with, to trick the eye to say that people weren't there. If we're talking like military, whatever. And then if you look at that in a broad sense, look at fashion, like, okay, now you have to color correct everything to make sure everything's cohesive. You have to space it out to where it fits well in the garment. You have to, do all these things that not a lot of people like think about. They're just like, oh, it's a camo
Mm.
pattern. And it's like, no, that camo pattern probably took someone about 4 or 5 months just to create, let alone put onto like a garment. You know what I'm saying?
Do you often feel like you're really pressed for time? Do you feel like you could work on designs longer than you're asked to do?
No, because I'm a procrastinator, honestly. And I think I think growing up as a procrastinator and designing as a procrastinator, especially in school and even just with clients, I might out myself on this one, but I feel like I've gotten so accustomed to just doing everything last minute. When I do get that amount of time, sometimes I just like make the design worse. Like I should have just like put all my effort into it like I normally do. And then like if I sit there and sit on it too long instead of just like popping it out, I'm just like, oh, I could tweak this and it just doesn't look good. And then
Mm.
like or you know what I'm saying? So I think I overthink it when I have that amount of time. But overall, no, I don't really ever feel pressure for time. I've had a couple deadlines where I'm like, ooh,
Mm.
I need this by this time, but I tend to figure it out. But that's because I grew up a procrastinator,
Yeah.
100%.
And what's next for you? Is design a long term, like in 3 years or 5 years from now? Is this something that you see yourself doing, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's for sure where I'm going to be. Now, where I'm going to be in design, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I'm happy where I'm at because it got me into the industry of the skateboarding industry somewhat. Like I'm dipping my toe in it, so I'm not mad where I'm at, but there's definitely a lot more to come for sure. Like I'm not ecstatic where I'm at. I'm not settled. Like I definitely have a lot more fire, to push out. But I don't know where it's gonna lead me. I can tell you it's just gonna be bigger. That's
Yeah.
all I know. It's gonna be something greater. It's gonna be something bigger.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be in design for the most part or tattooing. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Awesome. It's awesome. Awesome. Do you have any last words to any young artists or young designers who are hoping to make this their full-time job?
If you get invited to a podcast, make sure you study the questions first because because when you go on the podcast and you don't have the answers, you start rambling. No, honestly, I think the biggest thing that I would want someone if I were talking to a younger self of mine or an up and coming self of mine, honestly, just be real to yourself, just be true to yourself, and especially when it comes to design, stop. I think a lot of again, this goes back to like stop taking life so seriously and people need to stop trying to appeal to the masses and do what you want to do because Tyler Creator said it best. You don't know who's watching, and people are going to pick up you for you, not for what Timmy wants over here, for what Jenny wants over there. They're going to pick you up for you, and I think that's the best way to have the most pride too in your work is just keeping it true to yourself.